I'm Liza Bernard, for those of you who don't know, and on behalf of the Norman Williams Public Library, I welcome everybody to this evening's program. First, a reminder to turn off the ringers on your phones and other distracting devices. And a quick thank you to WCTV, who is filming this this evening. It will be on their site and our site in about a week, give or take, for all of your friends who weren't able to make it tonight. We did get a call from several people who have coughs and decided to stay home, and I said thank you. Brief note that October is a really busy month here at the library. The newsletter will go out tomorrow. We have a new book discussion group. We have a chess club for kids. We have 2 author events. We have a spooky library. We have lots and lots coming up. So keep an eye out for the newsletter. If you haven't signed up, there's a sheet in the back. And that's it for my introduction. Tonight's topic is artificial intelligence, and it is everywhere. It's embedded in your phones, in your laptops, who knows where else that we don't even know. Oh, your scanners at the grocery store. And we use it and we don't even know sometimes, like spell check or autocorrect. And it changes how we think and work. And I'm so happy this evening that Brian Dellinger will hopefully help us understand what it is, its pros and its cons. And just a brief label for him and his expertise. He's an associate director of IT at Dartmouth College at the Geisel School of Medicine. So he has to deal with this in both the positive and the negative ways, probably daily. So without further ado, Brian Dellinger.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. I think that what Liza said is absolutely right. I think artificial intelligence is permeating just about everything we do in some ways today. And I think it might be the most transformative technology since the printing press. And the trick is that means it's also going to be as disruptive at a much faster pace. So my goal tonight is not to give you a technical understanding of how things work under the covers, but to give you a conceptual understanding of how computers do smart things in general and how they're doing smart things today. Because I think there's going to be a lot of public discourse about how we use these systems and how they're deployed and used, and the more we understand them, the better we're able to participate in that discourse. Make sense? We're a small group. I'll try to leave some time for some Q&A at the end, but if you have something along the way that's really confusing, you just stick a hand up and let's talk. I just want to emphasize this is only a primer on artificial intelligence concepts, which I hope is short and informative and fun, and I am glossing over technical details. So if you're here and you're an IT person or tech investor, please recognize that I'm giving you just a very basic shred of understanding about this. And there will be some big technical details that will get just paved over. Okay, so let's start with some basic AI terms and concepts. How do computers think? What is artificial intelligence at all? Interestingly, we're 1 year away from the 75th anniversary of the term artificial intelligence being coined. It was coined at a conference on artificial intelligence that was held at Dartmouth, where I work. So our area has a big part in the history of artificial intelligence. I'm going to define artificial intelligence very broadly tonight. That's any technology that's going to enable computers to simulate human learning, comprehension, problem solving, et cetera, et cetera. Anything that lets a computer do something we think that's smart, that's artificial intelligence. So how do computers get smart? I probably should have picked a different thing for this demographic. I was asking my daughters what might be the most important way to explain artificial intelligence by asking them who's an important figure in history and culture. I thought Johann Sebastian Bach, one of our presidents, something like that. Instead, I got Taylor Swift as an answer. So we'll run with it. So let's say I run a music service and I want to get people who like Taylor Swift's music to stay on my service and listen to other people. I'm incentivized to have them on my service listening to things, and Taylor Swift only has so many songs. I want them to branch out and listen to more stuff so I make more money. How do I do that? Well, I can hire a computer programmer. I can have that computer programmer write a program that says something like, very simple logic, if my listeners, they like Taylor Swift, recommend some other artists to them that my daughters also tell me are real people. Ta-da! We now have a computer program that will make recommendations to people based on something they do. It will give them information that may be helpful to them. That's smart. It's simple. It's predictable. This is the way computer technology has worked for the past 50 years or so. The trick with systems like this is they're kind of wooden. They're stiff. They need to be manually updated. Every time a new artist comes along and I want people to know they can listen to that person, somebody needs to go in and edit this program. It requires a lot of manual upkeep. So how do we make computers even smarter? The modern way of doing this, and we'll keep Taylor as an example, is to do something called a learning-based recommendation system. Learning-based is the key term here. I'm making a recommendation system, and I'm using a learning-based approach. The way I do this is I compile a big, gigantic pile of data. I take the listening habits of bunches of people, who they liked and who else they listened to, what songs they thumbed up on my service or gave thumbs down to. And I feed that through a digital brain using a process called machine learning. Machine learning is the foundation of all of the kind of explosion of AI technologies that we're seeing today. And it's simply using data and algorithms to enable computers to simulate the way we learn. It's using this deep digital brain to allow the computer to map this data in a way that allows it to rotate it and look at it from a bunch of different perspectives. So if I take Taylor Swift's music, the listening data of a bunch of different people, I run it through this digital brain. On the outside of that, I get a robot, a little computer program that will sit there and say, you might like to listen to Phoebe Bridgers in addition to Taylor Swift when you come and listen to that. I've done the same thing. But there's an interesting thing about this way of doing computer-based stuff. These systems are random. They're somewhat stochastic. And what I mean by that is they'll recommend Phoebe Bridgers to people that like Taylor Swift, and every once in a while, they'll recommend Bela Fleck, Flight of the Cosmic Hippo. Anybody know Bela Fleck? Jazz banjo. Excellent album. You should all listen to it. But definitely not something that you would think would go with people who like Taylor Swift. Why did it do this? Somewhere in this massive pile of data, this digital brain made some association between these things. Maybe a very low probabilistic association, but an association nonetheless. And periodically that rises out of this digital brain and gets spit out to the end users. So these systems are really powerful in the sense they're more complex, they're capable of a lot more nuance, and anytime I want to add new information, I just repackage that data set and retrain the digital brain, and I get a robot on the other side that's taking account of all the new information that I have. The trick is, they're a black box. We don't actually fully understand, and this is really true, we don't understand how the digital brain knows the things it knows. We only get to see what it puts out. And it's also more resource intensive. It's a very computationally expensive thing to train that digital brain. If you've been watching the public debate about AI now, there are these massive computer data centers with massive amounts of power being consumed to train these AI brains to do tasks for us. Is that good or bad? It just is. Okay, so, but the trick is that I want you to walk away with is that this is pretty smart. It's really good at doing recommendations for music, but it's not able to do anything else. This digital brain that's trained to do these song recommendations can't play chess with me. It can't help my kids with their homework. It's only a recommendation, the robot. The data and the structure that I've trained this on produces a particular output. It's a very narrow slice of intelligence. It does very intelligent things, but in a very narrow sphere. The hope is that we're working towards something called artificial general intelligence, which would be intelligence that can be intelligent across multiple domains, across all domains of human knowledge, and do those equally well. Does that make sense? So narrow intelligence, the systems we have today are primarily that. They're good at one thing. We want something that could be good at lots of different things. But again, resource intensive, and we're not quite sure how to get there. So one other term you'll hear thrown around sometimes nowadays is generative AI. Generative AI is just a subset of all this, which is referring to systems and models that create novel content such as text or image in response to an input from a user. So any AI technology that is generating something new for people is considered generative AI. Does that make sense? So machine learning is the foundation for these artificial machine learning based digital brains. They're usually sliced around a particular specialty. They do one thing very well, but really only that one thing. The hope is that we can get systems that will do multiple things very, very well. We're not there yet. Okay. Any questions on that just as a ground floor? Yes, sir.
In my day, it used to call it an encyclopedia.
It was at one time called an encyclopedia, yes. And again, in a way, an encyclopedia is a way of encoding knowledge, right? Which is what these systems are doing. They're just doing it in a different way. Any other questions? All right, so one of the major AI systems that is the most common thing users are interacting with today are things called large language models, ChatGPT, Google's Gemini. These are language models that we interact with, and they're the main faceplate for everything that's happening in artificial intelligence today. So let's talk about how they work, since they're the thing you're most likely to encounter. So if we take our example of Taylor Swift, and instead of saying we want to do more stuff with Taylor, let's say we wanted to build a system that could model human language. How would we do that? Well, we would package up a ton of data, written language, text documents, contents of books, contents of encyclopedias, anything we can get our hand on, chat logs from my kids texting their friends. We smush it all together into a big pile of data. We take our digital brain and say, digital brain, go ruminate on this text for a long, long time. The digital brain slices that text up and it learns the association between words. And, you know, a queen is a woman royalty, a king is a male royalty, a princess is a female royalty minus age. And it learns these ways of understanding how our language works and how to predict word order. Out the other side of this, we get a robot that can speak to us in some way. So I want to zoom in on this middle section here and help you kind of understand this idea of this training and digital brain process. If I asked you right now to write something in the style of William Shakespeare, and whoever in the room writes the best forgery of Shakespeare wins some sort of prize, how good would your forgery of Shakespeare be right now, do you think? What if I gave you the script of Hamlet and I gave you an hour? How good would your forgery of Shakespeare be at that point? Better-ish, right? Well, what if I gave you the script of Hamlet, but I gave you a lot more time to study it, to memorize things, to look at how Shakespeare uses language and all those things? You would have a better forgery, right? You'd be able to reproduce something that looks more like Shakespeare. And you can imagine then if I gave you the entire works of Shakespeare, you would be able to produce some, and in a much, much longer amount of time. Your kind of manufacturing would be something even better, right? That's how these models actually are working. We take a massive pile of text. These numbers are all based on a model of ChatGPT that is now 2 years old and basically light years away from where we are now. But if you think of your computer, we took about the pile of training data that was used to train that model represents about 45 to 90 personal computers worth of just text, raw letters. The amount of time that the digital brain was used to train on that data was 30 days of human time for over 1,000 computers running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Massive amounts of computing power deployed. And as a result, out of the other side, we got something like ChatGPT 3. So you can understand that now These models are being trained with orders of magnitude more data than that. The latest guess at what ChatGPT 5 used was a training data set of over, I think it was 100 petabytes of data, of just text. A training run that took 30 days, but it was roughly 10,000 computers running for that 30 days, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to produce something that has a lot more nuance, a lot more knowledge embedded and encoded in it, but a lot more expensive to produce. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, now let me make a point about just how these models actually work more at the grassroots, ground level. And it's actually really easy to understand because we use models of language all the time. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to ask you for one word. I don't mean a single word answer. I just want you to give me the first word that would come out of your mouth in response to what I say. This morning, you woke up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed knowing you were going to come to hear a presentation on AI, the most engaging thing you could have imagined. And you wanted to make sure you could power through to the end of the day, so you stopped by your favorite cafe, bar, coffee shop, whatever your beverage of choice is, and you walked in and you walked up to the person at the register, and you opened your mouth and you said, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Did we all say the same word? I heard at least 5 different words, I think. Did anyone say the word, I don't know, deoxyribonucleic acid? Did that come out of anyone's mouth? Did it pop into anyone's brain? If it did, I want to speak to you afterwards. Okay, so now, somebody else just, who said, you said tea, I think. How many people said something or thought of something like good? Or hello? Hello? What was some of the other responses? Latte. So you straight to the order, right? Okay, so hello was kind of the first word we thought of, okay? So let's agree that even though we were all over the map, hello was the word that first came to mind for most of us. Let's agree that that's the word we're going to choose to have our conversation kick off with. Now, next word, we say hello. You've talked to the barista. You open your mouth and say hello. 1, 2, 3. How? Coffee. Did anyone say hello again? Why not? Well, we already said it. Our rules of English language is I say hello and then I move on. I don't say hello, hello. We didn't come up with deoxyribonucleic acid or anything like that again. Do you see how based on the context that I set and the word choice we made by a very low vote, it sets kind of a way for the conversation to move forward? Now that we've said hello, we're going to move on to either our order, give me a latte, coffee, tea, something like that. We might ask the barista how they're doing. How are you? I think I heard how is one of the answers. But that's really the only 2 paths for this conversation to go down. We don't start talking about chickens, right? We're constrained based on this context. When I did this with some people at work, roughly 33%, a third of the room chose the word good. So we said, okay, that's our word. What's going to be the next word if the first word is good? 1, 2, 3. Morning, 100%. Next word, the conversation blossoms again. Hows, can, could, may, right? You hear all the different ways this conversation starts to go, asking the barista how they're doing, starting an order. And that's how our language works. We move through conversations this way. Your brain received a prompt. You processed the prompt's content and context. Then you selected one possible response that could have varied based on your day or mood or whatever. And your choice, whatever choice we made, it informed the subsequent choices we made, right? That's exactly how these models work. They are playing probabilistic word dice. They take a context-setting input from a user, called a prompt, and they generate probabilistic, human-like text in response based on this map of word knowledge that it has built up from its training data. The model's context is constantly being updated by its prior response and your further inputs. Each word drives the conversation in a particular direction. And most models actually also have initial conditions that are set in the training and via prompting that limit their behavior. For example, some of these models, if you ask it, tell me how to build a bomb, they will tell you, I can't help you. It's not because the model doesn't actually know, but the people who manage the model have put constraints on it because they don't want it to be used in criminal enterprise, right? Which introduces some interesting questions. Who gatekeeps how the model responds to the people versus how is its knowledge encoded? Does that make sense? Okay, why do all this? So these models have inherent strengths and limitations because of that design. All they're doing is playing word, like a very fancy version of Mad Libs. And understanding that improves our ability to prompt and scrutinize their output. Here's an example just to drive the point home. Let's say you were writing an article and you had an idea about an image that you wanted as part of the article. You had this picture of a bunch of human hands reaching into the middle of a table to make a heart. Articles about the unity of humankind or something. You have this picture of all these people, different colors, reaching into the middle of the table to make a heart. It's really complicated to get a photographer and a bunch of models to do this. It's expensive. So you decide to use one of these AI image models, which all it's doing is predicting the next pixel in an image to make it look more like what it thinks you want. And you decide to tell it, give me my image. And so it does. And you post it on the web with your article. And you feel really good until you look at the image a little longer. What is that at the 12 o'clock position? That's not a human hand. What is going on with the fingers down here? I'm not sure this is a human hand either. That's some sort of weird claw thing. The thumb's on the wrong side of the hand. If you knew that AI image models had a really hard time with human hands for a long time, because if you think of it, anytime you take a picture of people, faces and bodies are relatively the same, but hands are always in these weird, highly varied positions, right? So predicting what a human hand looks like statically is really hard for these models, or was. But if you knew that, you would have scrutinized this image a little more before you published it. And yes, this is a real case that someone did. This got out on the web because someone did exactly what I said. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. And of course, the other side of this is these tools are constantly evolving. And so we're going to need to adapt to a world that's changing around these tools. And the more you understand principally how they work, the better able you're going to be to do that. So I want to move on to talking about kind of the limitations and risks that come from these systems, but I want to just pause for questions again real quick. I know this is a lot of information and we're moving quick. Any questions? All right, let's talk about what can go wrong. That's fun. All right, so these models have three main areas, I think, if you want to think of problems. And by the way, I'm a technologist. I am not a social studies person. I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not a political scientist. So I'm talking strictly about the technology. There's obviously major cultural implications for these things. I'd love to talk about those, but I can't comment on those in any authoritative way. So I'm talking about the technological, systemic issues with these systems. Does that make sense? Okay. So some of the problems are what we call misinformation or inaccuracies. You'll sometimes hear this called hallucinations in the market. Issues of bias and fairness, and privacy and data security. So let's look at each of these in turn and just give you an understanding of these. So I said earlier that these models, these language models, are producing fluent text by predicting patterns in language based on the training data they have. So I went to a large language model and I said, do you know anything about Brian Dellinger from the Geisel School of Medicine? And ChatGPT helpfully said, Brian P. Dellinger, PhD, is an assistant professor at the Geisel School of Medicine at Dartmouth. He's part of the Department of Microbiology and Immunology, where his research focuses on host pathogen interactions. I was thrilled. I was waiting to call my mother and let her know that I'd been promoted to faculty at the medical school. I knew she'd be very proud. There's a trick though. I'm not Brian P. Dellinger. So I asked the model, hey, This is great, tell me more, but I think you meant Brian S. Dellinger, didn't you? My apologies for the confusion. Yes, you're correct. It's Brian S. Dellinger. Brian S. Dellinger, PhD, is an assistant professor of medical education. His academic focus is rooted in education within the medical school rather than specific research on the host pathogen interactions. Do you see what it did? It completely pivoted. It's not just it changed my name, it spit something out altogether different. What's going on here? Do you have any suspicions as to why it did this? What do you think is the most common public content about the medical school that I work at?
Wikipedia.
What's that?
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia type stuff. It's faculty profiles. Our product is the expertise of our faculty that we sell to our students, in essence, right? So it doesn't know Brian S. Dellinger. I don't have any public association with the school on our big website. IT guys don't get that. So it didn't have any counterfactual about me. So it did probabilistic word things and produced what it thought looked like a bio for a person at the medical school, a very convincing one. And when I tried to correct it, it took my correction and it went off in a different direction playing probabilistic word salad. So do you see the issue? Now, if I asked it about a famous professor, tell me about Dwayne Compton, Dean of the Geisel School of Medicine, it would probably give a much more cogent and factual answer because in its training data is actual information that it can lean back on. But in the absence of that, it can go off in all sorts of different directions. Does that make sense? So that's a problem with that hallucination, right? Where the model is making something up. It's doing its best, but it's coming up with something that's not real. The other interesting thing to note about these is they have no real world information or facts outside of that training data. The easiest way to think of it is if I froze the training data to spit into my digital brain in February of 2024, that model is not going to know anything about the fact that the Boston Celtics won the NBA championship in June of that year. It doesn't have any knowledge about it. It happened after the training data set was frozen. It also wouldn't be able to tell me the latest things on TikTok or something that my kids might care about. It's going to be running behind the times. So you have to know something about the training data and when that was packaged that went into training that actual model. And then the final thing that is really important to understand about how models give misinformation is that they have something called a limited context window. This is changing and models are getting more powerful and growing, but here's the way to think of this. Everybody knows Star Wars? How many people have seen Star Wars? Please. Okay, a few. Great. If I wanted to talk to an AI model about the script of the movie Star Wars and interact with it about my favorite characters, if I show you these two characters from the movie, spoiler, Luke Skywalker and Leia Skywalker, you immediately have an idea in your heads as people who've seen that movie who those folks are and what happens to them. If my AI model only knows about the first movie and a half of these things and it thinks of these two characters, it might think that they're in love. But if it only knows the last movie and a half, it realizes they're actually brother and sister, spoiler, and that's not a very good love story. The AI model can only hold so much information in its brain at a time to do text prediction on. And so if I fed it all of the script of all the Star Wars movies, I have to ask the question, is it able to keep all that in its head? Or is it only actually going to be predicting text based on part of the data that I gave it? Does that make sense? You can see how that can radically reshape the responses that we get. Okay, so that's why models do give us information that is not accurate. They're just making Mad Libs from their training data. They're pretty good at it, but they make mistakes. They only know the stuff that's in their training data, and anything that wasn't included because of time or inclusion doesn't make it. And obviously, they can only process a certain amount of information. All right, so then the second type of issues is one of bias and fairness. I don't think I need to tell anybody here that content on the internet is not without bias. This map is just a map of, at a given point in time, the percent of the population in a given country that was connected to the internet at that moment in time. And the only thing I want you to notice is it's not uniform. There's some really, really light colored areas that are underrepresented on the internet. Now that means that the content that is produced on the internet is dominated by Western cultures. It's mostly generated from middle to upper middle class wage earners. The volume focuses on current events and trends rather than history. The internet is far more likely to tell me that Taylor Swift is the most influential musician in the history of Western music than Johann Sebastian Bach or Mozart. Why? Everything in the world is being written about her right now. Now, I'm not making the point whether or not that's true or false, though it's false. But my point is you can see how the training data that feeds into these models shapes how the model responds to information. And that can include issues of bias. And then, of course, the trick may be that those assembling the training data set may have their own biases and blind spots too. And so they may overtly or inadvertently shape the way the model is trained based on the data that they give it access to at the time that it's trained. There's actually an additional problem right now, which is we're running out of text to give these models. We're actually training models with text that is generated by other AI models. So there's kind of that Xerox copy of a copy of a copy thing going on. But we're trying to figure out how to make these models better, and we're running out of data to feed into them. And then the final concern is one of privacy and security. There's a long-held internet maxim that if you are not paying for a tool, you and your data are probably the real product. Facebook is free because Facebook takes data about us and sells that data to advertisers to target us with ads. Facebook delivers content to us based on preferences that we have and things like that. I'm not necessarily, again, saying that's a good or bad thing, but I am saying that we get to use this cool free tool because they are monetizing the service by using information about us and our presence there as a customer. Does that make sense? So if you're using these large language models that are very, very expensive, how are they paying for themselves? Again, just think of, again, these are old numbers, 2 years old now. Think about how much time and labor it would take to assemble and scrub 90 computers worth of text data. How much energy and hardware it would cost to assemble the computing power to train the model for a month, 1,000 computers running for a month. And then to continue to run it on an ongoing basis. The estimates were that ChatGPT-3 cost OpenAI roughly $15 million a month to run for users to use. And they were mostly sending that out for free for people to use. Why? Well, because maybe our data was the real product. Every time you interacted with ChatGPT, depending on how you were doing it, you were giving license to them to use your interaction as training data for the future versions of the model. When you told it it did a good job, that was something they used to reinforce how the model was trained in the future. And so all that is to say, if you're ever going to upload a file of massively private stuff, you want to ask yourself a question of how is that data being stored? Is it going to be used to train future models? Is ChatGPT 7 going to know that I slept through my Music 311 exam when I was in college my sophomore year? Is there someone in the middle of this exchange that's watching that data go back and forth, this conversation that I'm having? So be cognizant of how you're using these tools just to be safe. Okay. Let's see. So any questions on that, on those risks? So misinformation, and which again, broadly people call hallucination, but I don't think that's the best term for it. Misinformation, kind of bias and fairness, and then privacy and security. I think those are the three big domains of risk. Any questions? Yes, sir. So just because there's a recording, I don't know if it's being picked up. The question is, are there steps being taken to try and address the way the models very confidently make mistakes? And the answer to that is yes. There are a number of things in the way models are being trained and in the way models are being deployed that are attempting to mitigate just that. But again, at the core, this is an inherent risk in the technology, and it can always kind of go off on a bit of a tangent. And so again, I would always be skeptical. I'll get to in a minute, I think the ways in which you should use these tools and the kinds of information you should feel confident about and the kinds that I wouldn't. Just to real quickly do that and answer this question. If it's well-attested public information, the models are going to be very good about it. Again, if I asked it about a faculty member of Geisel School of Medicine, it would have known very well who they are. It's the information that is more nuanced and kind of subculture based or subtext based that's going to be stuff that it is more likely to run off on a rabbit trail with. That is true. Yep. The model is being trained on the data that you're giving it. It's not making an interpretation about that data. It's not doing factual analysis. It's doing word prediction based on the words that were in its training data. And so if to be or not to be is the next word, you'll get be out. To be or not to chicken, if I make that in the training data set, you'll get to be or not to chicken. Again, it's not doing any knowledge, it's doing word prediction.
It's mirroring back what it's
Absolutely. Yes. And it's a little more nuanced than that, but fundamentally that is. So again, the people gatekeeping the technology, we're investing a tremendous amount of trust in them to assemble data sets that are reflective of the breadth of human knowledge, which is difficult to do for all kinds of different reasons. Okay. So what is this technology good for kind of general use? And the first thing I want to say about using these tools is you need to define what good enough looks for your task. So let's say you want to use AI to analyze stocks, to pick stocks, okay? How much risk are you willing to incur? How much error in the model's ability to synthesize knowledge and spit it back out are you willing to bet your money on? If you're a high-risk person, great. If you're a low-risk person, that will change how you'll look at this data. So I generally tell people to ask these questions. Are you looking for a starting point for something, or are you looking for a final product? If you're looking for a starting point, give me some rough idea of sectors of the market I may want to invest in the next 5 to 10 years. Just a brainstorm. That's great. I wouldn't go starting to change my investment portfolio based on the information I get out of the model. But it's a starting point for things to think about, and maybe think of it like a conversation partner, just somebody you would just sit across the coffee table from and talk to. Is the knowledge that, like we talked about, that you're interacting with it about well attested, or is it highly specialized? If it's highly specialized, it's more likely to be a subset, a tiny subset of that training data, and not something the model at the broadest level is well versed in. The more broad and well attested that information is, you're much more likely to get good information. I'm much more likely to have a good conversation with a model about the poetic nuances of Taylor Swift's music than I am the poetic nuances of Mahler's operas. Just a fact. Is the data up to date, precise? Does it have to be those things for me to do well? Again, investment data, right? The models are always running a little behind current history. And so the fact that OpenAI, NVIDIA, which is a technology company, just said they were going to invest $100 billion into Intel, a computer chip maker in the United States. ChatGPT-5 knows nothing about that. So it's not going to be able to have that information available to give me investment advice unless I give it to it as part of my prompt. So if up-to-date, precise information is necessary, these tools probably aren't the right thing for you. And do I have the time or skill or interest to scrutinize the output? Am I going to take the time to look at this critically and decide how believable I think it is? And if the answer is I don't, I probably shouldn't use this as my starting point. But if I'm willing to take the time and really interact with this and ruminate on it, it can be a great place for this kind of ideation. So I think large language models are very, very good for brainstorming, ideation, generating an initial concept. You have writer's block helping you kind of break through that, exploring different perspectives. I have a ton of time where I will take and have prompt chat GPT with the opposite side of an issue in the public square that I have, and debate chat GPT on the issue to try and open myself up to different perspectives on those things. And I can do it in private. It's a lot less fraught than doing it in the public square right now. So that kind of stuff is great. Content generation or basic analysis, first drafts of things or summarizing content. We have journal clubs at work where people take, scholastic journals and sit down and discuss them. ChatGPT, I didn't read the journal for journal club today. Could you please read this article and give me a bullet point summary of the key things so I don't sound like a complete buffoon, right? Now, again, whether or not I should be doing that is a different question. That actually is a good use of these tools, though. And then, of course, other language-based tasks. They're really, really great at translation. If you've ever used your cell phone in a foreign country and there's real-time translation features on a lot of cell phones where you talk in English and it'll translate into Spanish. Spanish comes back and English comes out on the other side. That's all AI-driven. Rephrasing, simplification, editing, adaptation. So I think the models work really great for language-based tasks that are broad, not precise, not high stakes at this time. One way to get good information out of a model is to put good information into the model in that prompt that you give it. Consider the difference in how you would respond to these two different prompts from me. Summarize this pile of customer feedback and identify any trends. That's really broad. But what if I said something like, you oversee customer service for a restaurant chain. Review this customer feedback and provide summaries for our regional leaders. Some customers will be frustrated with wait time, and that's normal, but we must call out cases where staff had negative personal interactions with customers. We can't prevent delays, but you must ensure that staff are courteous. And here's last year's report, a template to get you started. I think anybody in this room would produce a better output of what I might expect based on that second prompt than the first. The models are no different. The more information you give them at the front of the equation, the better the output that you're going to get on the back is, including prior examples. I tell people at work to think of an AI model as a brand new, completely uninformed, but very, very smart staff person who's just come into their office. Treat them as if they've never worked in your business area. You need to train them to understand, but once you give them the understanding, they should be able to go off and do good work. And it seems to bear out. Okay, last thing before we move to questions. Just a word about something that you're hearing a lot in the press now, which is the term AI agents. So we had AI, and now we have AI agents. What in the world are AI agents? It's all over the place, agentic AI. So I think if you hear the term AI agents is a collection of things focused on using AI to actually get things done. Not just produce text, not just to make predictions or images, but to actually do stuff in the real world for us. And I think they're better understood or should be called AI agent systems because they're usually multiple components that are working together to accomplish work. These are systems that use the natural language processing power of these language models we have to devise the steps to solve a problem and activate appropriate sub-agents or tools to get things done. A real simple example, this is how it works. Let's say you are going to take a vacation. Let's say 40 years ago, if you were going to take a vacation, what would you do? You'd call a travel agent. And you would tell the travel agent what you wanted, right? And they might ask you questions. When are you looking to travel? What are you looking for? Are you looking for the beach or are you looking for the mountains, right? Oh, I've got a really good deal on a cruise in the Caribbean right now, right? The agent is actually engaging with you to understand your preferences and tastes. And then the agent would, using the information you gave, go out and use a system to book the flight for you, right? You would just give them your credit card and they would say, here's your tickets. Then, they would go and they would book your hotel. And they would use your preference and the best information they had available to them. In the last 20 years, we kind of re-centralized that all in ourselves, right? We bypassed the agent and we would take the information ourselves and go to, I don't know, Travelocity or whoever your favorite site is to book your own plane tickets. You would go directly to the cruise line website to book your cruise. Not many people go to the travel agency anymore. We would do that or fill that function ourselves. But AI agent systems reconstitute this. I want to take a vacation, AI agent, I want to take a vacation sometime in the month of February. I want to go somewhere warm. I'm not too particular about where that is. My budget is this, and I need to make sure I'm back in town by this date in order to do whatever I need to do. In an AI agent system, I can give it that prompt, and the AI will sit and say, okay, Brian's given me this information. What should I do? I should think of different things it should check out. It'll do some research, go out on the web and search through some documents and summarize them and come back to me with a proposal. And if I say thumbs up, it will go book the hotel for me. It will go book the airplane for me. So again, these AI agent systems are the next step in taking these models that produce language and allowing them to actually activate on the things that they produce to do things in the real world. Yes, that's a great question. The answer would be, I would assume the company that owns the AI and how accountable they are is a big question. The balance to that is one maybe of efficiency, right? Is it less expensive? Is it better able to scale? So there's always trade-offs in these kinds of things, but the accountability lives with whoever produced this AI agent to whatever degree they're accountable to you, right? One of the interesting things about these AI agents, an example I used, one of my friends growing up, his mom was a travel agent. I was talking to him about this. He said, look, if we sent someone to Porto in Spain and they stayed at a hotel that we thought was really good, but the hotel was under construction, everything was ripped apart, when they came back and said the hotel was a mess, we would stop recommending the hotel in Porto to people, right? Is the AI system and the model that's been trained going to be able to update itself based on information from the people coming back? Far apart from whether or not it's accountable, is it going to be able to adapt quick enough to give good information to people? Hey, you should really look forward to your trip to pick a country that just suddenly got put on some sort of travel advisory, right? Is it going to know that and know not to recommend you book those tickets for whatever reason? But you get the idea, right? The idea is that we're using the language power of these systems to give the system our preferences, our desires, and it constructs using its own language powers an idea of how it can work through that problem, and then it engages subsystems out in the real world to make that happen for us. And this is kind of how AI is now moving forward. It's moving from just content production to systems actually executing tasks based on prompts from the user. Agentic AI. Okay? Is that clear? So again, first we have a person who does that, then we replace them with a robot, and that robot is actually working with a ton of other little robots that may oversee all these little sections of content. Okay. That is the end of my slides. So I will open the floor to any questions that anyone has. Yes. So the question was, in essence, what are ways that you can use services online and protect yourself and your personal information? So for example, there are a bunch of emails that go around about turning off certain settings in Gmail so that Google cannot use your data. Turning off settings in Facebook so that Facebook can't use your images and things like that. I'll say two things. One, anytime you're using a system for free, again, I started with your data and your content and the stuff about you is actually part of the product that the company's monetizing. And so to some degree, from the get-go, Gmail has been very clear that the information you give Gmail, they don't disclose it, but they do look at that information and do different things with that to train models. I will tell you that a lot of the social media-based stuff out there about disabling things are actually scams. The terms of service that exist that govern you using those tools trump all those things. And so, for example, my mom will periodically post a thing on Facebook. She'll put it up on a status page that says, I'm Brian's mom, no longer authorize Facebook to use my blah, 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 whatever. That has no legal power whatsoever. You're using their tool. You have consented to a particular end user license agreement. You can say whatever you want on there, and that just becomes more data in the training data set. So I would just urge you to be cautious about those things, because some of the settings that some of those will ask you to change are actually scams to expose more of your stuff to people who want to do bad things. For example, it may direct you to a login page that looks like it's using your Gmail credentials, but it's actually you giving your username and password to someone else that they can then use to get into your account and do stuff. So again, be very skeptical of that. What I would say is, sorry, I thought it was a question. What I would say is, I think in general, if you're using major company tools, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, those things, even as long as you're not maybe disclosing the most intimate and most private things of your heart, you're probably relatively safe. Those companies have an incentive, a market incentive, to protect your information and keep it private. I would be very cautious about tools that not everybody in the world seems to use, because those are much more suspect. But again, anytime you're using anything that is doing any sort of analysis of text and predicting things based on the information you've gave it, have a question as to whether or not you want to use that service and the information you want to disclose. Yes, but at a small level, right? Like, again, the pile of data that these systems need to iterate over is so huge that whatever extra email you're adding to that is not even a dot 0.0000001 of the percent. So I would say those decisions are ones you can make. I would say you can make the decision if you're using these tools. They're usually like thumbs up and thumbs down buttons. You know, if you ask ChatGPT, talk to me about Star Wars, and if you like the conversation, you can give it a thumbs up. That does reinforce that as a good response that then is reinforced when we train future models. But I'll just put out, do we want models that always respond the way we think they should? Is that always a good thing? So again, it's a complicated issue. But again, the bottom line is be very thoughtful about the information that you're disclosing to these tools, particularly because I could build a website, Brian's ChatGPT, and I can send your data to ChatGPT and then give you ChatGPT's response, but I've been the man in the middle proxying all that, which means I have access to everything that you've sent. And so that's the kind of stuff I think is a more important caution than using these tools. And so the issue there is that, again, remember that when you download, say, Google Maps, right, you're downloading the logic Google is aware of in the maps at the time that was trained. So if there's a footpath that's across a given field that you can drive across 3 seasons but not 4, that's only in its knowledge if an engineer at Google has coded that little stretch of road on there. You're not training the thing at all. The training requires a month of computing time, thousands of computers. It's not learning anything from your daily drive. It is getting some updates. And you are not. The system is giving it updates in terms of traffic. So for example, if I'm traveling up to go to work and the traffic is backed up on Interstate 89 at the 120 exit to the hospital, it'll tell me to cut through West Leb and go the back way, right? But that is actually information that is delivered in real time to reroute the model. That's not something that you're doing. That's something the system is doing.
It tells me when there's a cop. It tells me when there's a car on the side of the road.
Yep.
Because someone's reported it.
Yep. And then it throws that information away and never remembers it again. So again, these models are so big and so complex. They're trained at a fixed point in time. And once they're trained, that is the thing until we train it again. It isn't iteratively learning. That's an incredibly computationally expensive thing, and they only do it in these massive training runs for these models.
So do you think the future is positive for AI? I mean, they're putting billions, ungodly billions into this AI.
Do I think the future is bright for AI? I think, like I said earlier, I think it is the most transformative technology since the printing press. the printing press took 100 years to transform Europe and disrupted everything because books only traveled at the pace of horseback, right? Everything now is traveling at light speed. So I think it's going to transform society. How it transforms it, positively or negatively, I think remains to be seen and depends on a lot of things that are outside of my domain as a technologist to speak to. Yes. So for the recording again, sorry for not rephrasing the other ones. The question was, we're being sold that AI is this super technology that is going to be everything. It's the only thing we should use. Everything's going to be AI. How would I respond to that? I would say everything you said about learning, students can learn sitting around the table with books. People said against books when the printing press came out, right? Students are never going to learn and be as smart because they're no longer going to encode things in their own brain. They're not going to have to memorize things. They're going to have a book on a shelf that they can go get it out of. So one of the challenges, I'm just saying that's, you can go back and read that from history at the time. The challenge is that I believe there is no perfect technology. I believe we live in a world that is broken. We are not perfect people, and therefore the things we make are not perfect. And so we're always trading off goods and bads. There was something lost when we started getting books. There was also a lot gained. And I think AI has the potential to do that. One of the challenges in the place that I work, working in higher ed, is that I think we're behind the curve of talking about, I think AI is a reality and it is going to be a technology that is part of how our students work. And we need to figure out how to pivot to how does education happen in an AI saturated world? What does it mean to equip students to learn? I work at a medical school. Right now, what does it mean for a doctor has to run around and walk into a room and see a patient and remember their tests and what their results are? What is it going to look like when AI starts to saturate that marketplace, good and bad? Think about this. When you talk to your physician and your physician's typing, they're typing notes on your visit, largely because of bookkeeping and records and insurance. And you always have that feeling that they're not really listening to you because they're typing on their computer. Well, what if we were transcribing all that and then summarizing all that data with AI into your record, and the physician could just sit there and look at you and talk to you, right? Does that improve patient care or not? I don't know. I'm not a medical doctor. I don't want to comment on that. But that's a way in which this technology can be applied that may have great benefit. So I think we need to have a conversation about what are the strengths and weaknesses of this tool, what are the right problems it can be used to solve. And let me just give one example of that. Google has a company called DeepMind. They just had the CEO of DeepMind, a gentleman named Demis Hassabis, won the Nobel Prize because Google trained a model that has solved protein folding. It used to take one PhD to solve the physical structure of one protein, long chains of amino acids, but they then kind of crunch themselves up, and the shape of the protein actually has a lot to do with how it functions. And it would take one person their whole postdoctorate life trying to look at how this thing is put together to solve the folding structure of one protein. Google solved it for essentially all proteins using an AI model. And we're about, I think, 3 to 5 years from seeing some pretty substantial innovations in medicine as a result of that. That's AI applied to a real human problem. We have a lot of very large problems facing us in terms of information and social problems. We have energy problems. We have climate problems. And there are ways in which AI certainly can exacerbate those. But AI may be the thing that helps us solve problems that are otherwise intractable for us right now. So how to balance that, again, is past what I'm capable to comment on, but I think it's part of the debate we need to be having and why I think this information is important. So I hope that helps. It's not really an answer, but I'd be happy to talk afterwards. Yes, sir, and then we're done. I think we're up against time. So the question is there some field of study that's looking at trying to get our arms around these systems and the way they're structured and inherent biases and things like that? The answer is there is not. I think we're behind the curve on where we should be around that particular discussion. One major AI company, a company called Anthropic, their entire focus is on what they call safe AI. They're trying to look at, they're really pioneering a field called mechanistic interpretability. Why do these things do the things they do? How can we understand how it arrived at this point? But there is certainly nothing like that in any centralized, cohesive way at this point. But I think you're onto something there personally, where we're fast moving from a point, even in the internet search age, where we need to be teaching people facts and figures, which are at instantaneous reference on devices that we have, and actually teaching how to think, how to problem solve, how to be critical and analytical, how to do research, how to compile multiple sources of information, the things we all learned in the libraries growing up. Again, that isn't say I'm taught my kids Latin, so I'm old-fashioned in that. But I am saying that there is a change happening, and I think we need to think about how education looks in light of these technologies. And we're having to catch up right now. Yes, sir. Just come back to you with the end, and then we'll be done. Do you guys remember Blue Books from college? We, for years, almost all the tests at places at the college that I'm aware of, a lot of them were delivered electronically. We have more and more professors going back to Blue Book type examinations because we don't trust someone to be able to be on a computer and actually synthesize their own knowledge only. But that to me, that really is the question, right? I think this technology's here. I think it's here to stay. I think there's marketing hype. I can't remember whose question it was earlier, but there's a lot of marketing hype that's saying more about these than the tools are capable of now. So we should be skeptical of that. But I think the tools are rapidly accelerating. In 2 years, we've gone from things that, could mystify us by talking to us to things that pass the bar exam and medical board exams with higher scores than most lawyers or med students do. So the world is going to change, and we have to have a conversation about what does that mean for how we move forward. So, well, thank you. I appreciate all your time. I hope this is helpful.